Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely deconstruct the biological framework of sleep. We are moving way beyond that basic tired advice of just get 8 hours, and we're diving straight into the first principle science. We're going to trace the exact mechanisms of recovery, moving all the way from the microscopic, cellular events happening deep in your brain, right out to your macroscopic, athletic, and cognitive performance in the real world. There's this brilliant quote from Tononi and colleagues that perfectly frames our journey. Sleep is the price the brain pays for its neuroplasticity. Sleep isn't just passive rest, right? It is a highly aggressive biological cleanup and rebuilding protocol. While you're awake, your brain is constantly accumulating new connections and metabolic waste. So sleep is literally the non-negotiable physiological tax you have to pay to reset that system. And if you default on that payment, well, your biology immediately begins to degrade. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the neuroscience of deep sleep, then move into hormones, immunity, and inflammation, followed by cellular repair and muscle. After that, we'll look at the real-world cost of deprivation, tackle circadian disruption and jet lag, and finally lock down specific strategies for sleep optimization. All right, let's dive into section 1, the neuroscience of deep sleep. Think about this. During slow-wave sleep, your brain literally shrinks. The cells actually contract to allow what's called the glymphatic system to activate. It essentially washes your cerebral cortex with this massive convective wave of cerebral spinal fluid. This is critical because it clears out all the metabolic byproducts that build up while you're awake, most notably these neurotoxic beta-amyloid proteins. Without this deep fluid wash, that toxic waste just accumulates, and it directly disrupts your neural transmission, your psychomotor speed, and your physical coordination. And this biochemical cascade beautifully illustrates the causal chain of why you actually feel tired. Basically, your brain runs on glycogen, which is stored in cortical astrocytes. Prolonged wakefulness violently depletes those reserves by about 40%. Now, as that energy burns, a byproduct called adenosine starts accumulating outside the cells. This adenosine binds to your neuronal receptors, and that cranks up your homeostatic sleep pressure. The longer you're awake, the higher the pressure gets. A deep recovery sleep is literally the only way to rapidly resynthesize that glycogen and reset the balance. So, how does the brain manage everything you learn in a day? Enter the synaptic homeostasis hypothesis. Think of it kind of like pruning a tree. To prevent your neural networks from just totally saturating, sleep actively scales down the noise. It selectively weakens the less important synaptic connections, cutting the dead weight essentially, while preserving the critical ones. It's an elegant system that perfectly balances your brain's capacity to learn again the next day. Moving on to section 2, let's look at hormones, immunity, and inflammation. Your endocrine system is hypersensitive to sleep loss. Just 2 nights of restricted sleep, say limiting yourself to about 4 hours in bed, violently disrupts your metabolic hormones. The numbers here are wild. You get a 24% spike in ghrelin, which is the hormone that makes you hungry, and an 18% drop in leptin, the hormone that signals you're full. So not only are you starving, but your biology is actively pushing you to crave calorie-dense, carbohydrate-heavy foods. It perfectly explains why you crave a donut rather than a salad after a grueling red-eye flight. Beyond metabolism, restricting sleep essentially partially shuts off your immune system. Carrying a sleep debt severely suppresses cell-mediated immunity. It completely spikes pro-inflammatory cytokines, things like IL-6, CRP, and TNF-alpha. Now, for an athlete, intense training already creates a temporary open window of immunodepression. But sleep loss takes that window and rips it wide open. It severely delays your recovery and dramatically increases your risk of upper respiratory tract infections. Let's transition to section 3, cellular repair and muscle. Down at the molecular level, we have a specific signaling pathway called the AKT-mTOR pathway. This is literally the biological engine that rebuilds your muscle tissue after the microtears caused by exercise. It drives hypertrophy and physical repair. But sleep loss directly threatens this process. When you're deprived of sleep, your body shifts away from protein synthesis and tips the balance heavily toward protein degradation. It ramps up autophagy and ubiquitination pathways, which is a fancy way of saying your body actually starts breaking down its own muscle tissue. Now, this next finding is staggering. Researchers did a cellular stress test on the peripheral blood cells of people who combined 24-hour sleep deprivation with high-intensity anaerobic exercise. The result? A massive shift in their cellular machinery toward apoptosis, which, if you don't know, is programmed cell death. The markers that cause cell death, like BAX, spiked, Meanwhile, the markers that promote cell survival and rhythmicity, like BCL2 and BMAL1, just plummeted. So you aren't just feeling tired, you are systematically stressing your cells to the absolute point of self-destruction. Which brings us to Section 4, the macro real-world cost of deprivation. 1.7. That number is the exact injury risk multiplier for adolescent athletes who sleep less than 8 hours a night. And the crazy thing is, we see an identical 1.7-fold increase in adult and collegiate populations who sleep 7 hours or less for just 2 weeks. It's not a guess, it is a mathematically precise predictor of physical, structural failure. And objective actigraphy tracking proves that it's not just about you subjectively feeling a bit groggy. Your total time awake mathematically predicts your likelihood of sustaining a catastrophic injury the very next day. Why does this happen? Because when the brain fails to scale down that synaptic noise we talked about, it leads to microscopic attention lapses, delayed reaction times, and poor spatial judgment. And that is happening at the exact same time your musculoskeletal repair is impaired. It is literally a perfect storm for an injury. All right, Section 5, circadian disruption and jet lag. People mix these two concepts up all the time, but understanding the difference is absolutely vital if you want to optimize your performance. Travel fatigue is just the physiological tax of sitting in a cramped seat, dealing with stressful airport logistics, and getting dehydrated. That happens even if you fly directly north or south. Jet lag, however, is an entirely different beast. It specifically requires crossing at least 3 time zones, which fundamentally misaligns your core body temperature and your cortisol secretion from the local environment you just landed in. And the direction you travel actually forces distinct biological trade-offs. Going eastward is generally much harder on your biological clock. It forces an advance in your circadian rhythm, which heavily impairs your aerobic capacity and technical coordination. Westward travel, on the other hand, is generally easier to adapt to chronobiologically, but it induces massive travel fatigue and has been shown to adversely affect game statistics in team sports. This is exactly why highly personalized circadian management is so critical for true athletic readiness. Finally, Section 6, strategies for sleep optimization. So, how do we actually weaponize all this knowledge? Well, you can't manage what you don't measure. Screening with validated clinical tools like the ASBBQ reveals some fascinating insights. For example, in a major validation study of athletes, nearly 20% exhibited clinical signs of poor sleep. And what was the massive hidden culprit? Over 90% of those athletes reported that unexplained muscle soreness was directly disrupting their sleep architecture. Finding and fixing these hidden friction points is always step 1 in optimization. Now, I absolutely love this next concept. Sleep banking is real. It's not a myth. By strategically extending your sleep for a few nights before you know you're going to be restricted, like before a massive travel day or a big competition, you activate biological pathways that build a resilient buffer. Getting that extra sleep has been shown to upregulate neuroprotective growth factors, like IGF-1. This enhances your brain's energy metabolism and helps sustain your cognitive performance when you inevitably hit that period of sleep loss. All right, let's lock in this actionable framework. These are your non-negotiable interventions. First, you must track your heart rate variability, or HRV, as a highly sensitive marker of your autonomic nervous system's recovery. You have to manipulate your light exposure because light is the absolute primary anchor for your circadian clock. Knowing that your hunger hormones will spike, you have to preemptively dial in your nutrition. You absolutely must modulate your physical training load based on what your sleep data is telling you. And finally, use sleep banking as a tactical weapon before big trips. Because once you truly understand the cellular realities of sleep, from the glymphatic system washing your brain, to mTOR rebuilding your muscles, to preventing actual cellular apoptosis, the choice to prioritize your sleep is no longer just about feeling rested. It becomes the ultimate biological performance advantage. So I want to leave you with a question to think about. Are you actively building resilience, or are you just barely surviving the daily degradation of your own nervous system? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this masterclass changes how you view your recovery forever.